The fluorescent lights hummed quietly in the large classroom of the Galactic Xenobiology Institute. Students from different worlds sat at metal desks, their various forms creating strange shadows on the white walls. Some had 4 arms, others at scale that changed color, and a few looked like walking crystals that made musical sounds when they moved. Professor Velthuin stood at the front of the room. She was tall and thin with purple skin and 3 eyes that could look in different directions at the same time. Her long fingers held a stack of electronic tablets that glowed blue in the dim light. "Today you receive your final assignment," she said in her deep voice. The translation devices on each desk turned her words into sounds that each species could understand. This would decide if you pass or fail this class. Kim Tae-ho sat in the middle row, looking calm while the other students made nervous sound around him. He was the only human in the class, which made him stand out even more than usual. His black hair was cut short, and he wore the same gray uniform as everyone else, but somehow he looked different, more relaxed, less afraid. The professor walked between the desks, placing a glowing tablet in front of each student. "You will work in teams of 4. Your mission is to study dangerous creatures on the frontier world called Kepler 438c. Excited whispers filled the room. Kepler 438c was famous among students. It was a world where colonial settlements had been built, but wild creatures still ruled most of the land. Many research teams had gone there. Not all of them had come back. Tae-ho picked up his tablet and read the mission details. The screen showed pictures of a massive creature with 6 glowing eyes and teeth like knives. Its skin could change colors to match its surroundings, making it almost invisible. The file called a shadow maw and listed it as a Class 9 predator. "These creatures are extremely dangerous," Professor Velthuin continued. "They are 6 meters long, have razor-sharp claws, and hunt in groups. They have killed dozens of colonists and 3 research teams in the past year." A student with insect-like features raised one of his 4 arms. "Professor, what exactly are we supposed to do with these creatures?" "Observe them from a safe distance. Take readings with your equipment. Record their behavior. Under no circumstances should you engage with them directly." Her 3 eyes focused on different parts of the room. "The minimum safe distance is 1 kilometer. Anyone who gets closer will fail immediately." Tae-ho looked at the creature's picture again. In the image, the shadow maw was crouched over what looked like the remains of a colonial transport vehicle. Its 6 eyes seemed to stare right at him through the screen. Most students would see a monster. Tae-ho saw something else. The way it held its head, the position of its ears, the tension in its muscles. It reminded him of something. "Now for your team assignments," the professor said. She began reading names from her list. "Kim Tae-ho, you will work with Kixval of the Vorthak, Siren of the Siltari, and Blorth of the Quellan." Tae-ho looked around the room until he spotted his teammates. Kixval looked like a giant mantis with compound eyes that reflected every light in the room. His green exoskeleton was polished to a shine, and his movements were quick and precise. When he saw Tae-ho looking at him, he made a clicking sound that the translator turned into disapproval. Siren was harder to spot at first. She looked like a collection of living crystals arranged in a roughly humanoid shape. When she moved, she made soft musical sounds like wind chimes. Her body caught the light and threw it around the room in tiny rainbows. Blorth was sitting near the window, his amphibious skin currently a nervous yellow-green color. He had large, wet eyes and webbed fingers that drummed anxiously on his desk. When emotions change, his skin changed color with them, making it impossible for him to hide his feelings. After class ended, the 4 teammates met in the hallway. The corridor was wide and tall to accommodate the different sizes and shapes of alien students. The walls were covered with pictures of successful research missions and famous graduates. "I have reviewed your species files," Kixval said to Tae-ho, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. "Humans have a disturbing tendency to approach dangerous animals instead of avoiding them. This concerns me greatly." Siren's crystalline form chimed softly, which the translator interpreted as agreement. The records show that humans often attempt to domesticate creatures that other species consider too dangerous to approach. Blorth's skin shifted to a deeper shade of worried green. "The shadow maws have killed so many people. How can we study them safely with a human on our team?" Tejo listened to their concerns with a patient smile. He had heard similar worries before. Look, I understand why you're nervous, but humans don't try to befriend dangerous animals because we're crazy. We do it because we're good at reading animal behavior. We know when something is truly aggressive and when it's just scared or protecting something. The mission parameters are clear, Kixval insisted. 1 kilometer minimum distance. No direct contact. Simple observation only. Of course, Tejo agreed, but something in his tone suggested he was already thinking beyond the basic requirements. The next morning, they would board a transport ship for the 3-day journey to Kepler 438c. As his teammates discussed equipment and safety protocols, Tejo quietly made his own preparations. He packed the standard research gear, but he also added extra medical supplies, some food rations, and a few items that weren't on any official equipment list. Something told him he was going to need them. The red dust of Kepler. 438C swirled around their landing pod as it touched down with a loud thump. Through the small windows, Tejo could see endless canyons carved into the planet's surface like giant scars. The rock formations were tall and twisted, creating a maze of stone that stretched to the horizon. Their pilot, a blue-skinned creature with 4 arms, quickly opened the cargo door. "I'll be back in exactly 7 days," he said nervously. "If you're not at this exact spot, I'm leaving without you. This planet gives me bad dreams." The 4 teammates stepped out onto the rocky ground. The air was thin but breathable, and the gravity felt lighter than most worlds. Above them, 2 small suns cast everything in a reddish glow that made the canyon walls look like they were made of dry blood. Kixval immediately began setting up their mobile research station. His 4 arms worked quickly, assembling sensors and communication equipment with practiced efficiency. Base camp established. All systems running normally, he announced. Siren's crystalline body caught the strange sunlight and threw rainbow patterns across the rocks. She made a series of musical notes that the translator turned into words. "I'm detecting large life formed approximately 2 kilometers north." The readings matched Shadow Maw biosignatures. Blortha's skin had turned a pale blue color. That meant he was trying to stay calm, but Tejo could see yellow spots appearing around his neck. Fear was creeping in despite his efforts. "The colonial settlement reports say they hunt mostly at dawn and dusk," he said, checking his tablet. "We should have several hours of relative safety." They packed their long-range observation equipment and began hiking toward the canyon system, where the readings had come from. The ground was covered with loose stones that clicked and scraped under their feet. Strange plants with silver leaves grew from cracks in the rock, and occasionally they heard distant calls from creatures they couldn't see. "Stay in formation," Kixval ordered. "Remember the safety protocols. We maintain minimum distance at all times." As they moved deeper into canyons, the rock walls rose higher around them, blocking out much of the reddish sunlight. The shadows were deep and dark, creating perfect hiding places for any creature that might be watching them. Tejo walked slightly behind the others, but his eyes were constantly moving. He studied the ground for tracks, the walls for scratch marks, and the shadows for any signs of movement. His teammates were focused on their equipment readings, but he was reading the land itself. Fresh tracks. Siren chimed suddenly. Her sensors had detected chemical traces in the air, less than 6 hours old. The creature passed through this area recently. They followed the invisible trail deeper into the maze of stone. The canyons twisted and turned, sometimes opening into wide spaces, and sometimes narrowing until they could barely walk 2 by 2. The walls were smooth in some places and rough in others, carved by thousands of years of wind and water. After 2 hours of careful tracking, they found what they were looking for. Through a gap between 2 massive rock pillars, they could see into a hidden valley, and there, moving with liquid grace across the canyon floor, was their target. The Shadow Maw was even more impressive than the pictures had shown. It was easily 6 meters long, with a powerful body that moved like flowing water. Its skin shifted colors constantly, matching the red rock so perfectly that sometimes it seemed to disappear entirely. 6 glowing eyes swept back and forth as it searched for something. "Magnificent," Blorth whispered, his skin now showing patches of scientific fascination mixed with his fear. "Look at that adaptive camouflage system. It's not just changing colors. It's matching texture, too. Kix Val set up their long-range cameras and sensors, maintaining their required 1 kilometer distance. Through the powerful scopes, they watch the creature's every movement. Behavior appears normal for a large predator, he reported. No immediate signs of aggression. But Tejo was studying something else. Behind a curtain of hanging rock formations, he had spotted the entrance to what looked like a cave or den. There, he said quietly, pointing to the hidden opening. That's where it's going. The shadow maw had stopped moving and was looking directly at the rock formation. Its posture was different now, less like a hunter and more like something else, something protective. We need to get a better position, Tejo said, studying the canyon walls. There's a ledge about 50 meters up that should give us a clear view of that den. Negative. Kix Val clicked firmly. We maintain current position. The mission parameters are clear. But as they argued about positioning, the unstable canyon rim, where they had placed some of their equipment, began to crumble. Loose stones and dust cascaded down into the valley below, making a noise that echoed off the canyon walls like thunder. The Shadow Maw's 6 eyes immediately locked onto their position. Its body went completely still for a moment, and then it began moving toward them with purpose. It knows we're here. Siren's musical voice had risen to a higher pitch that meant panic. Emergency extraction protocols. Now! Blorth was already reaching for the communication device to call for early pickup, his skin cycling rapidly through colors of terror. But Tejo was still watching the creature through his scope, studying its movements. Wait, he said, his voice calm despite the situation. Look at how it's moving. That's not hunting behavior. The Shadow Maw had stopped at the base of the canyon wall below them. Instead of trying to climb up or find another way to reach them, it was pacing back and forth, looking up at them occasionally but not attempting to attack. That's protection behavior. Tejo continued, lowering his scope. It's not trying to hunt us. It's trying to keep us away from something. As if to prove his point, 3 smaller shapes emerged from the hidden den behind the rock curtain. Cubs. Young shadow maws that were clearly not fully grown. And even from their distant position, Tejo could see that something was wrong with them. The 3 shadow maw cubs moved slowly near the den entrance, and even from their distant position, Tejo could see they were in trouble. One was limping badly, dragging its left rear leg. Another had what looked like deep scratches along its side that were still bleeding. The 3rd cub was the smallest, and it barely moved at all. They're injured, Tejo said, adjusting his scope to get a better look. All 3 of them. Kix Val's compound eyes reflected the light as he turned to stare at the human. That is not our concern. Our mission is observation only. We need to call for emergency extraction immediately. The adult shadow maw below them had positioned itself between the cubs and the canyon wall, where the research team was hidden. Its 6 eyes never stopped scanning their position, but its body language was clear. It was a parent protecting wounded children. Blortha's skin was cycling through rapid color changes. Yellow fear, red alarm, and brief flashes of blue sympathy. The cubs look very sick, he said quietly. Those wounds are infected. They might not survive much longer. Not our problem, Kix Val repeated, but his voice had less certainty than before. Siren's crystalline form chimed softly as she processed the data from her sensors. The chemical readings suggest the adult has been hunting much more aggressively than normal. Increased stress hormones, desperation markers. Tejo lowered his equipment and began removing his protective gear. He unbuckled his weapon harness and set it aside, then pulled off his armored vest and helmet. What are you doing? Blorth asked, his skin now solid yellow with panic. I'm going down there, Tejo said simply, gathering medical supplies from their research kit. Kix Val's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. You cannot be serious. That creature will kill you the moment you get close. No, it won't, Tejo replied, stuffing bandages and antiseptic into his pockets. Look at its behavior. It's not hunting us. It's protecting its cubs. There's a big difference. The difference being that you'll still be dead, Siren chimed, her musical tones reaching frequencies that indicate extreme concern. Tejo stood up and looked down at the Shadow Maw family in the valley below. The adult was still pacing, but now it had moved closer to the cubs. Every few moments, it would nuzzle one of them gently, then return to watching the canyon walls for threats. On Earth, we had animals like this, Tejo explained as he checked his medical supplies. Big predators that would attack anything that came near their territory. But when their young were hurt, they would sometimes accept help from the strangest places. Earth animals are not 6-meter alien killing machines, Kixval pointed out, his voice getting higher with stress. You'd be surprised, Tejo said with a small smile. We had things called grizzly bears, polar bears, lions, tigers. Same basic principle. Dangerous predators that become even more dangerous when protecting their young, but also more desperate. He started climbing down the canyon wall, using natural handholds in the rock. The loose stones shifted under his weight, sending small cascades of dust and pebbles into the valley below. The shadow maw's head snapped toward the sound immediately. Its 6 eyes locked onto Tejo's descending form, and its muscles tense for action. But it didn't charge. It waited. This is insane, Blorth whispered from above, watching through a scope. It's going to tear him apart. Tejo reached the canyon floor and stood completely still. The shadow maw was 30 meters away, close enough that he could see the individual scales on its hide and the way its claws dug furrows in the rocky ground. Its breathing was heavy and controlled, like a predator ready to spring. Easy, big one, Tejo said softly, keeping his voice calm and low. I'm not here to hurt you or your cubs. I want to help. He slowly knelt down and placed the medical kit on the ground between them, then backed away several steps. The shadow maw sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring as it tried to identify the strange scents. Minutes passed. Neither human nor alien moved. Above them, Tejo's teammates watched in terrified fascination as the standoff continued. Finally, the shadow maw took one careful step forward, then another. It approached the medical kit cautiously, never taking its eyes off Tejo. When it reached the supplies, it sniffed them thoroughly, then looked back at the human with what might have been curiosity. Tejo began moving again, but slowly. Each step was deliberate and non-threatening. He kept his hands visible and moved in a slight curve rather than directly toward the cubs, showing that he wasn't trying to corner them. The smallest cub made a weak sound from near the den. The adult shadow maws had whipped around at the noise, and for a moment, Tejo saw past the fierce predator to the worried parent underneath. I know, he said gently. You're scared for them. I would be too. He was close enough now to see the wounds clearly. Deep claw marks for what looked like a territorial fight with another large predator. The injuries were several days old and badly infected. Without treatment, the cubs would probably die within hours. Tejo knelt beside the largest cub and slowly opened the medical kit. The adult shadow maw moved to hover directly over him, so close that he could feel the heat from its body and hear the deep rumble of its breathing. One wrong move would be his last. But the cub whimpered when he touched its infected wound, and the adult did something unexpected. Instead of attacking, it made a soft, encouraging sound, the kind of noise parents make to comfort frightened children across every species in the galaxy. Tejo began to clean the wound, and the shadow maw watched every movement with intense attention. 3 days had passed since Tejo first approached the shadow maw family, and the canyon had become a different place entirely. The cubs were healing quickly with proper medical care, their wounds now clean and sealed with synthetic skin patches. The smallest one, which had barely moved before, was now playing with its siblings in the shade of the den. Tejo sat cross-legged on a flat rock, updating his research notes while the adult shadow maw rested nearby. He had started calling her Nuri after watching her graceful movements in the early morning light. The name meant world in his language, and somehow it seemed to fit this magnificent creature who ruled her small corner of the canyon. Day 3 of direct contact. He spoke quietly into his recording device. Subject shows no aggressive behavior toward team members. Cubs are responding well to treatment. Adult female demonstrates problem-solving abilities far beyond initial classifications. Nuri lifted her massive head at the sound of his voice. Her 6 eyes focused on him with what looked like interest rather than the wariness she had shown at first. Over the past few days, she had begun to understand that his quiet talking wasn't a threat. From their observation point high above, his teammates continued to document everything. Kixval had stopped demanding immediate evacuation, though his constant clicking still showed his nervousness. Siren recorded every interaction with scientific fascination, her crystalline form humming with excitement at the unprecedented data they were collecting. "The creature is exhibiting pack bonding behavior," Blorth reported during their daily transmission to the Institute. His skin had shifted to purple, which meant he was deeply absorbed in scientific study. "It has essentially adopted our human teammate into its family structure." This was true in ways that surprised even Tejo. Each morning, he would wait to find fresh meat placed carefully near his sleeping area, Nuri's way of making sure her new pack member was fed. She had also begun bringing him other gifts. Interesting stones that caught the light in beautiful ways, rare canyon flowers that bloomed only in hidden places, and once a perfectly preserved fossil of some ancient creature. The cubs had accepted him even more readily than their mother. They would approach him for attention and comfort, making soft chirping sounds that he was beginning to understand. Each cub had its own personality. The largest was bold and curious, always the first to investigate anything new. The middle one was cautious but affectionate, often rubbing against Tejo's leg like an enormous cat. The smallest was the most playful, despite having been the sickest when he first found them. "Watch this," Tejo said to his recording device as he picked up a smooth stone. He threw it across the canyon floor, and all three cubs immediately gave chase. They tumbled over each other in their eagerness to reach it first, their healing wounds forgotten in the excitement of play. But it was their mother who impressed him most. Nuri had begun teaching him things about the canyon that no research equipment could have discovered. She showed him hidden paths through the maze of rock walls, leading him to places where fresh water bubbled up from underground springs. She demonstrated how to read the wind patterns that warned of approaching storms, and how to identify the safe sleeping spots that were protected from the planet's fierce nighttime cold. "The intelligence level is remarkable," he continued his recording. "She's not just surviving in this environment, she's mastering it, and she's trying to teach me to do the same." That afternoon, Nuri led him to a high ledge that overlooked the entire canyon system. From this vantage point, he could see for kilometers in every direction. The view was breathtaking, but Nuri hadn't brought him here just to admire the scenery. She pointed with one clawed foot toward a distant part of the canyon, where dark smoke was rising into the air. Then she made a series of low rumbling sounds that seemed to express concern or warning. Tejo raised the scope and focused on the smoke. Through the magnification, he could see the wreckage of what looked like a colonial transport vehicle. The smoke was coming from its still-burning engines. "There's been a crash," he called up to his teammates. "Recent. The wreckage is still smoking." Nuri made more sounds, and this time Tejo thought he understood. She was telling him that more humans were in trouble and asking if he wanted to help them. "She's showing me where people need help," he said in amazement. "She understands that I'm the same species as the colonists, and she wants to help rescue them." Over the following days, their relationship deepened even further. Nuri began responding to simple commands that Tejo taught her, while she taught him the complex social signals that shadow moths use to communicate with each other. The cubs learned to play games with him, hiding among the rocks and then pouncing when he pretended not to see them. His alien teammates watched it all with a mixture of fear and fascination. Even Kixval had to admit that what they were witnessing was revolutionary. "Your species never ceases to amaze me," Siren chimed one evening as they watched Tejo brush Nuri's hide with a makeshift grooming tool. "You see potential companions where others see only monsters." The cubs were curled up nearby, making soft purring sounds that vibrated to the canyon walls. Nuri had positioned herself so that she could watch over both her cubs and her adopted human pack member. "Maybe that's because we know what it's like to be misunderstood," Tejo replied, scratching behind one of Nuri's ear-like projections. "Sometimes the scariest-looking creatures are just families trying to protect each other." Tomorrow would be their last day before the scheduled pickup. But looking at Nuri and her cubs, Tejo was beginning to form a plan that would change everything. The extraction shuttle landed with a loud roar of engines, sending red dust swirling across the canyon floor. Captain Zedvar, a nervous Centaurian with silver scales and bulging eyes, stepped out of the pilot's seat and immediately froze when he saw what was waiting for him. Teho stood calmly beside the landing area, but he wasn't alone. Nuri sat beside him like an enormous, deadly pet, her 6 eyes watching the shuttle with curious interest. Behind them, the 3 cubs played in the dust, chasing each other in circles and making happy chirping sounds. What in the 7 moons is that thing doing here? Captain Zephyr squeaked, his voice climbing to a pitch that hurt everyone's ears. Her name is Nuri, Teho said simply, and she's coming with us. The pilot's scales turned pale white with terror. That creature has a bounty of 50,000 credits on its head. The colonial government wants it dead. The colonial government is wrong, Teho replied, walking toward the shuttle with Nuri padding silently beside him. She's not a monster. She's a mother protecting her family. Kix, Val, Siren, and Blorth emerged from behind a rock formation where they had been hiding with their equipment. All 3 looked nervous but excited. The past week had changed their understanding of everything they thought they knew about dangerous alien species. The data we've collected is revolutionary, Siren chimed, her crystalline form sparkling in the afternoon light. This creature shows intelligence, empathy, and complex social behavior. The Institute needs to see this. Captain Zephyr backed toward his shuttle, shaking his head rapidly. I'm not transporting a Class 9 Predator. My insurance doesn't cover that kind of cargo. She's not cargo, Teho said firmly. She's a passenger. And she's already saved more lives than she's ever taken. This was true. Using Nuri's knowledge of the canyon system, they had successfully located and rescued the crew of the crashed colonial transport. The injured colonists had been terrified at first, but they quickly realized that the massive predator was actually helping with the rescue operation, using her strength to move debris and her knowledge of safe paths to guide them to the pickup point. The cubs had been relocated to a protected area deeper in the canyon system, where they could grow up safely without interference from colonial expansion. But Nuri had made her choice clear. She was bonded to Teho now, and she intended to stay with her new pack member. Look at her, Teho said, scratching behind Nuri's ear-like projection. She immediately began making a deep purring sound that vibrated through the ground. Does this look like a vicious killer to you? The pilot was still backing away, but he was also looking at Nuri with growing curiosity. The massive predator was behaving nothing like the reports had described. Instead of snarling and threatening, she was calmly watching discussion like she understood what was happening. The Institute will want to study her, Blorth added, his skin showing patches of excitement mixed with nervousness. This could change everything we know about predator species and their capacity for domestication. Finally, after much argument and several calls to the supervisors, Captain Zephyr agreed to transport Nuri to the Institute, but he insisted on triple hazard pay and a full medical examination before departure. The journey back to the Galactic Xenobiology Institute took 3 days. Nuri spent most of the time curled up in the cargo bay, but she would often come to the passenger area to check on Teho. The other passengers on the shuttle, traders, diplomats, and tourists, were initially terrified, but they gradually became fascinated as they watched the giant predator behave like an oversized, very polite pet. When they arrived at the Institute, chaos erupted immediately. Security teams mobilized with weapons and containment equipment. Emergency protocols activated throughout the facility. Professor Velthuin fainted when she looked out her office window and saw her former student walking across the campus courtyard with 6 meters of apex predator following him like a loyal dog. This is completely unprecedented. Dean Zarfiles declared during the emergency hearing that was called within hours of their arrival. The Dean was an elderly creature with tentacles instead of arms and a voice like grinding rocks. This creature has killed dozens of sentients. She was defending her territory. Teho explained calmly while Nuri lay beside his chair, occasionally nuzzling his shoulder with her massive head. The colonial settlements were built right on top of traditional Shadowma nesting areas. She was protecting her cubs the only way she knew how. The hearing lasted for hours, with officials arguing about safety protocols, insurance liability, and research ethics. But in the end, the scientific value of what Teho had accomplished was undeniable. No one had ever successfully bonded with a Class 9 predator before. The data they had collected would revolutionize xenobiology. 3 months later, Nuri had become the Institute's unofficial mascot and the subject of groundbreaking research into interspecies relationships. She attended lectures where students would nervously raise their hands to ask questions while a massive predator dozed peacefully beside the professor's desk. She had learned to operate the food dispensers in the cafeteria and could open doors by herself when she wanted to visit Tejo in different parts of the building. Kixval still refused to enter their shared dormitory without full protective gear, despite clear evidence that Nuri had developed genuine affection for all of Tejo's teammates. She would often bring Kixval gifts of interesting rocks or flowers, trying to win over the nervous Vorthak. Are all humans completely insane? Kixval asked one evening, while watching Tejo brush Nuri's camouflage-shifting hide. Tejo grinned as Nuri made her thunder-like purring sound. Pretty much. That's what makes us useful. Through the window, they could see other human students returning from their own field assignments, each leading what appear to be different species of heavily armed alien creatures on improvised leashes. Nuri lifted her great head and made a sound that definitely seemed like laughter.